get my phone turned off too.
Oh yeah, I need to do that. I'm
Yeah.
always bad about having my thing on.
I got a new phone today though. We were at the Verizon store and I was just joking. I said, "Hey, you guys got any really good deals? Like, can I get a free phone?" And she's like, "Well, what phone do you have?" And so I showed her. She goes, "Yeah, you can get $850 for that." I was like, "Cool. What do you have?" She's like, "Well, we got the new iPhone 15." I was like, "How much is that?" She's like, $845. I was like, "So I can just swap it out?" She's like, "Yep, and we'll give you $5 back." So I did it.
Heck yeah. That
Yeah.
is a heck of a deal.
So Nathan, I shouldn't have complained about my day because I forgot about that. That was a high point.
What was wrong with your day?
Oh, nothing. We were just talking about days, and I was saying how it was one of those days where you feel like you got a little less done than you could have, and I didn't really complain all out and complain. I just kind of lamented a couple of points.
Yeah, I was telling him how it was about the easiest day I've had in, I don't know, maybe all year. I don't know why. I just had to run some errands and got some other stuff done, but I don't know. It's a pretty low key day.
That's good. You're like the type of guy that you find work pretty easy, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like to work. I mean, I really do. I don't, like you said, I don't have to. It's not hard for me to find something to do and kind of get lost in. So that was the problem for me with horses, really. You know,
Yeah.
you get a horse out and like 3 hours later, and
Yeah.
you still got a lot of other horses to ride. So
Yeah, because doing the work is easy, right? It's like managing your time. That's the hard part.
yeah, yeah, no
That's
doubt.
anything. Yeah, if you could just like put your head in the sand and like, okay, this is my one job. I'm just going to do this job and never have to think about anything else. Gosh, life be
Yeah,
chummy.
yeah. I saw something. I was gonna send it to you because I thought it was kind of funny what we were talking about when you were here in Kentucky. But have you seen those ads for those timers, like the magnetic timers? Like you like turn those things and the time goes up. Like somebody ought to get one of those things like engraved in their saddle horn. you know,
Yeah,
you could
I can get behind that.
turn that bit. You could turn that baby up and be able to maybe keep track of stuff a little better. So
Yeah. Ben would want like I don't know how big they make Rolexes, but like a Rolex on the top of his saddle horn.
oh my gosh, yeah,
Why do you say that?
Because you're like a classy guy. And I feel like if you had some sort of timepiece on your saddle horn, you just want to go all out and get like a Rolex.
Yeah, I could get behind that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, speaking
Man,
of cool
yeah, that would,
saddle tooling, the other day I saw Kerry Schwartz posted some saddle he's working on, and there was a stink bug in the picture. But for a minute, I thought the stink bug was in the tooling, and I'm thinking, well, that's a new look. Somebody wanted a stink bug walking across their saddle horn, and then I realized, it was accidental. But
yeah,
well,
that's
right off
funny.
the bat, Nathan, and I don't know that much about what you do, and I was
Sure.
just up there in Kentucky. I would have loved to come by. I know Joe got to visit you and all that
Yeah,
good
should have
stuff.
called me.
But could you just kind of tell us a little bit about your operation right now and what you're doing, and what it is that
Sure.
you work so hard at and got a break from today?
Yeah, so pretty much we're I mean we're a cow calf off, outfit, but we sell beef direct to folks. But a big part of, I guess, what makes us a little different, and I think both of you guys listen to Rogan, and that, you've probably heard like Will Harris on there, maybe by chance, White Oak Pastures, So, we've really kind of tapped down into, really trying to make a living, farming and ranching. And, you hear the whole thing all the time, there's no money in that deal. And, there's not when you're doing it, a certain type of way, and that, the margin's so close, and both of you have experience in operations. You understand how it can be. And so, when I was kind of transitioning out of the horse stuff, from it being my full-time thing is doing, I wanted I didn't want to, leave that setting, because it's just kind of what I love. So I had to figure out a way to get profitable, pretty quick. And so, we started implementing a lot of like ranching for profit kind of mindset, and really, trying to be low input and kind of getting the stock that would do well with just, just minimal input, kind of get fat on air like a good easy keeping quarter horse or something, and so yeah, I don't know, it's kind of a broad spectrum, but we're still kind of trying to nail down what it is exactly. But we're farming, we're ranching, we're whatever you want to call it. We're doing it in a way that kind of goes along with, I guess, the natural cycles, and it kind of promotes a low input system. So it's better for everybody. It's better for the cattle. It's better for us, and it's better for the consumer. So it's kind of what we're doing.
So prior to, starting to run your place the way that you are now, did you have experience in the same industry, but kind of in a different setting where, because you say, you're kind of going after the, like ranching for profit type of mentality. Have you been a part of the same sort of idea, like the same cow-calf operation where you felt like it wasn't ranching for profit? It was like ranching to just, next year, maybe we'll make it next year kind of mentality.
Yeah, well, in a way, I experimented with, backgrounding some cattle and feeding out grain, and, trying to finish them and sell them at the sale barn. And sometimes it was good and other times it wasn't. And, so yeah, in that aspect, I guess, yeah. My family, has farmed for some time. But, I was kind of the first one. My dad was, I guess, really, he got out of it early and joined the military, and that's what got us out west. But, my interest really came, sorry, I think I'm dodging out of frame there. My interest really came to it, through being around other people and a lot of, kind of that culture. And, you're seeing a lot of ranches selling out, and they're just tax write-offs for people with a lot of money, and I just hate seeing that, and because I respect and love that culture so much, and I just had to find a way to make it happen, so that's kind of how, I guess, we kind of came to it. So yeah. Well, and I'll tell you this too, really, the horses were kind of a segue to it, because that got me thinking a lot different. 2012, when I really started looking at the the Ray and Tom and Buck stuff, and that really got me thinking outside of the box compared to what I always kind of did. I think sometimes we're married up to tradition a little too hard, and that's sometimes it's kind of, people will die on some hills. I quite haven't figured out yet why they would, but I think, I don't know. I think being a black sheep's a good thing, especially in today's world, and it tends to be the people who are the black sheep that ends up coming around at some point, and it gets kind of popular. So maybe it'll work out one day.
Yeah, I think you have a really good point there, because we were just talking about that before the podcast, how, that aw shucks mentality is only going to get you so far. And, you could do that with horses or with the cattle. And we were talking about that, how, as young guys in agricultural settings, we're starting to realize that stuff like riding around in your truck and being on the phone and learning how to use technology to your advantage is it's not just a luxury, it's a necessity in this day and age. And that kind of that is the frontier, essentially. And so that's really great. That do you find that do you know a lot of other people that basically do what you do? Like, I don't know what you what that world's like, but I would feel like that could be kind of a slim peer group.
It is, it's funny. My whole life, I think I've always been a black sheep in that, like, I don't know, it just appeals to me, If everybody's going that way, I usually am going the other way. But, I kind of found myself, you know, um, we came to this place several years ago and again, just like with the horsemanship thing, when you start out in that, you feel like you're on an island, and you're out there doing your thing. And it was really amazing the amount of people that kind of came out of the woodwork who were kind of implementing a lot of the things that we were doing. Not exactly the same, but they were hungry for something, just like we were. And yeah, believe it or not, we found a lot more people. This area is kind of becoming a hotbed for it. And you know it's really been a blessing, to be where we're at. And we're as far as selling beef, we're in a great location. We're outside of Lexington, a big college town. um, you know, um, Down in Danville. That's another smaller college, which is just south of us, Joe. That's where we went to eat the other night, Joe. Um, those, it's just, I don't know. I couldn't have planned it out, I mean, the Lord really blessed us when he planted us here and I couldn't see it, but, I think that's how it goes sometimes, we don't see it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So I think you have a really kind of interesting story, Nathan.
Oh
So
boy.
I'm gonna be kind of like, can we get like a sense of your timeline? Like, so I know you grew up out west, right, in the Dakotas.
Well, I grew up, and I've been in Alaska and everywhere. My dad joined the military. That's what got him out of the farming here. And my dad joined the military. I was born in Arkansas. Wouldn't know it from anywhere though. Like if you dropped me there, I'd just, unless you're in the Ozarks, I've been there a lot. But anyway, if you dropped me there, I wouldn't have a clue. But we were in Alaska, North Dakota, Missouri. So yeah, we've been a little bit of everywhere. And in that, my dad retired when we were out west, and eventually we moved back here because that's where him and my mom were from. And my grandparents were getting older and transitioning out, and my uncle had gotten cancer and stuff like that. So there's a lot of reasons to come home, and for my parents, but it's just now. I mean, I think we've been here over 10 years now, maybe, and it's just now starting to feel like home.
Sure.
I still kind of I don't know who it was, but there's some president or something. It might have been Roosevelt, maybe, but he said something about when you're born and when a young man or something is out in like wild places and open, fast places, and you take him away from that, he'll always be longing for that. And I think that's definitely where I've always been. So, we've been all over, So it's been good though. It's given me a lot of education and people and personalities and a lot of different culture. So
Gotcha. And were you? So I know he was in the military. Did you guys growing
mm,
up? Did you have horses? Did you have kind of like little like farms on the side, like kind of a farmette type property, or like did you grow up in
yeah,
agriculture still?
no, I mean not exactly. Yay and nay. I mean, for me, when I was a kid, really like bush pilots and like guides were my cowboys. I mean, they were like, bush pilot, man, he was cool. So, and you have to excuse me, when you came to Kentucky, I think you dropped off some pollen, and I've been like dealing with it ever since you left, man. So, um, but anyway, no, not exactly. My dad, I did have a different military upbringing. As my dad grew up in an agricultural setting, and he definitely wanted us to have that same deal. So, although he was in the military, most of the time we didn't live on base. We he would rent like a farmstead or something like that, and that's where we'd live off base. And but no, as far as livestock, I was, it was in the communities around us, but it wasn't in my day to day life until a little bit later in life. So, but it was around me. Friends had it and stuff like that. But I was kind of more focused on the I don't know, like the outdoorsy stuff, like the hunting and fishing and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so were you guys back in Kentucky by the time you were like graduating high school and kind of striking out on your own?
Yeah, I finished up. Yeah, I finished up school in Kentucky. Yeah, I finished up school here, and yeah, that was kind of, um, I'd been riding horses before that, and been around them and stuff. But it was just all fun and games, just trail riding with friends and stuff like that. And it wasn't until, like I said, I think around 2012. I don't know. When did the Buck movie come out? Was that 2012, 2011, something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Sometime around
Something
there.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
2011.
kind of caught wind of that, and kind of got tired of, horses running off with me and that kind of stuff. And that's, kind of when, I got into the horsemanship deal. So, yeah.
Cool. So did you go straight, like what did you do after high school?
Yeah, so I didn't know what I was going to do after high school. So, I thought originally, again, I was really, I've still always really been into the outdoors and, just, I don't know, being outside, man, sweating, being in nature. I love that stuff. And, I thought about kind of some game wardeny stuff, and I actually took some classes, went to some criminal justice stuff, and I was like, I can't do this. It's like, no way, I can't do this. And so it was pretty. I think my first class, I was kind of like, yeah, not for me. So I left. And then, like I told you guys, aviation always had a part in my life too. I'd always, from a little boy, always really been, just really infatuated with aviation and planes and that kind of stuff, and mainly the bush planes, the kind of the backcountry stuff. And so I decided to go to school and be an aircraft mechanic, and that's what I did. So yeah, I went to school for a couple of years, got licensed, and worked for a while. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Did you ever
And
consider becoming a pilot, or why aircraft
Yeah.
mechanic?
Well, I've always wanted to own my own plane, like my own bush plane, and the biggest thing that I always heard being around guys in aviation was, it's buying the plane's the cheapest part, just like a horse, like that's easy. Like you can, you can do that. It's the upkeep, it's the maintenance, it's the overhauls, it's that stuff, and it's pricey, and it, the insurance is crazy on them. So for me, I was kind of like, well, I don't mind working on things. I don't really want to work on vehicles, but planes to me would be maybe a step up for me in that department, and then that would also give me the ability to perform all my own maintenance and that kind of stuff, which would take that cost out of it. And so yeah, it's been that was kind of the idea behind it, and it's a growing industry, and they've been shorthanded for years, so job security, that kind of stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Well, and chances are, I mean, you're probably always going to be in a hangar, and less grease and less oil spilling everywhere. And yeah, it does kind of sound appealing. Have like a cup of coffee and your wrenches, and you're working on an airplane. And I might have kind of a romantic idea of being an aircraft mechanic now, but I'm sure there's some hard days too. But that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's interesting how that is kind of like horsemanship, where you dove in to kind of learn it from the inside out and become the expert from the very ground level up. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's kind of me. I can't help but be that way sometimes, I guess. I kind of tend to immerse myself in whatever it is I'm interested in. I like what you're talking about before we fired this thing up. It's like, I don't know, if you're gonna do it, I mean, might as well do it. I'm not gonna halfway do it. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So 2012, is that you graduated high school around then, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was just thinking about this. Isn't it like, it kind of goes without saying, but it's a long form podcast, so we can kind of talk ourselves in circles and it's no big deal.
Sure.
There's a pretty profound impact that Buck documentary has had, because at least it sounds like all three of us, that's kind of what at the very least put horsemanship and like what we do, or like what we're passionate about, like it put that on the radar, right? It like for all three of us, it kind of like changed our life course.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like you said, you saw it and kind of put it on your radar. I saw it. It took a while for me to actually start pursuing it, but I got a pretty thick skull,
Sure.
so it takes a while to seep in when I see some information.
Sure. Yeah.
And then Ben, was that kind of like your first, how you heard about Buck the first time, was the documentary?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I mean, like we've told the story, right? That's there he is. There's Buck on the documentary, just in red and yellow. But
yeah,
I mean, it meant so much to us. It's burned onto our ball cap now. Riding Rebel.
Yeah. But cool. But all of us were kind of at that like we were teenagers when that came out, so it was like kind of the right age to see something like that and have it be really impactful. So it's like, I don't know, in a way we're like the documentary generation, a little bit in this whole deal. So I just think that's pretty cool, because it's like, when all of us were like 10, 12 years old, you wouldn't sit there and think like, oh yeah, there's going to be this like little indie film that comes out and it's going to like have a big impact on all these like young men like across the country and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
it's that's a really good point,
no doubt,
Joe. But I kind of have a question then for both of you guys. When you saw that film, were you guys sort of at the end of your chain with horses, or was it something that grabbed your interest because you just maybe didn't have interest in something at the time?
You go first, Joe.
I don't know. Well, so when I saw it, I guess I probably would have been in high school, like junior or senior in high school, sometime around then. Like I was in high school, but I could drive. And it definitely, like at that time for me, like that point in my life, sports were way more important than horses. Like we had horses at our farm and I'd like ride a horse to work cows and stuff. But like I wasn't into horses. And so I saw that and it was kind of weird. I kind of got into sports pretty big in high school. And then I told myself, I was like, okay, when I go to college, for some reason, I was like, when I go to college, the emphasis is shifting back to horses. And at the time that meant like joining, like playing polo and joining the hunt seat team and stuff like that. And so I was like, I'm going to focus on horses, because like there was a big gap between, for me, like seeing the movie. And I guess at the time when I saw it, I thought it was like, oh, this is some cowboy out west, but it was still like, that's happening thousands and thousands of miles from me. And, now looking back, it's like, what, a third of that documentary is filmed in North Carolina, like, but I didn't know that at the time because I'm just some high school kid. And I'm like, look at this cowboy. So there was, like I saw it and I was like, man, if I ever lived in a spot where I could like get around that stuff, I'd do it. And then it was just kind of the naivete of youth, I guess. And then down the line, I had someone tell me, you ought to go to this buck clinic in North Carolina. And I was like, oh, he comes to the Eastern United States. And I mean, looking back now, if I had just like Google search Buck Brannaman, I could, potentially be way handier than I am now because I would have got it started like 5 years earlier or something. But it's no big deal. It all works out. So there was like, I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, that resonates with me. I want that. But I didn't realize I had a way to like act on that impulsion until years later, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So, but it wasn't like I didn't see it and like run towards it immediately. And I didn't see it and think, oh, because at the time I was just like, well, you just get on a horse and like ride it around and like you do your job or whatever. And I don't know, the whole concept of like refinement and that was like, I don't know, that was like what women in tights did in a show ring to me. It wasn't like he was the first guy like dressed like a cowboy who was like, man, that's a really nice horse and look how it's bridled up and
Mm-hmm.
And just growing up in Virginia, that was always kind of like, I hate to say it, but it was like women did that. And so,
Sure.
it's a bit like you talk about, how like women need role models or like African Americans need role models. It's like, it doesn't seem achievable until you see someone that looks like you doing it. And like, that's probably to some extent what we all saw. And Buck was like, oh, that's something that's like a target we could aim at. Right. As opposed to me growing up and just seeing like, I don't know, all these like hunter jumper female trainers going around. It's like, oh, that's not really something I'm ever going to be. So why am I going to get that involved with horses?
Sure. Yeah.
What about you, Nathan? Yeah. That's kind of a long-winded answer, but
I saw it, and I think like everybody, like you hear something and like it sounds good, and I don't know, it's like trial by fire, It's like you've got to like try to implement it and really suck at it for a while, and not that you ever maybe get to where you want to be, but it's like when you start to look back and you're like, just my thought process changing, like starts you, like that's the first step in starting down that path, and so for me, I think, I saw that, and like you, it's not, I don't want to say I necessarily like started burning all, Bucks DVDs and like watching them on repeat at that point, because that's not the case. It wasn't till years later, but it's just like the ideas, from the documentary, and just like that things could kind of be different, just like what I was telling you guys with the stuff we're doing now. It's the same thing for me. So was, I think Ben's original question was, were you, what was it, Ben? Were you, kind of at a low point, maybe? Is that what it was?
Yeah, or I think I said at the end of your chain, kind of out of
Yeah, the end of
options.
your chain.
Maybe
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
bucked off or just really
So,
discouraged with your horses.
yeah, and I think I'm not so sure I knew I was at the end of my chain. I started to realize that, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. A horse runs off with you, and it's like, well, you just better know how to stay on him, and don't fall off, and or something like that. But then you start to realize, and especially as you get older and you have family, or you're thinking about a family, or seeing kids riding, and you kind of want them to survive it. So, or at least I do anyway. So, you know, uh, I think it was definitely a process, for me, and it still is. I still, even though I'm not doing it every day anymore, I still think about it every day, in some way.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
do you have something to add, Ben? Sorry.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So then you see the documentary, and then you're going. Were you working with horses or riding horses when you were in school for the aircraft deal, or?
Yeah, yeah, I was, but not really for the public. None of that stuff that hadn't even crossed my mind. I was just trying to survive my own, and make them a little better. But and my family, my soon-to-be family, my wife's family, they were really getting into horses, and uh, I don't know. It was like, I started to see things, and not, it's like once you know better, you're kind of like held responsible to that. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
once you know the truth, you kind of got to like, you know, you're kind of a fool to not try to abide by that. So that's kind of where, I don't know. That's kind of where it started for me. So in that time period of being an aircraft mechanic and working with horses on the side, just kind of doing my own thing. And like I said, my wife was riding. She rode a lot, and I was riding, and yeah, you know. Sorry, 1 second. My dog is talking.
Talking sounded like he was barking.
Oh my goodness.
Get after him,
He's
Nathan.
been in the house laying by the. He's been in the house by the fire all day, man, and now he's got his like second wind.
Oh, that's okay.
So,
Life's been too good
What's
for
his
too
name?
long.
Bo. He's a
Oh,
Mr. Bo. Yeah, he's upset I didn't let him in the bunkhouse, but he's gonna be ornery. So.
oh yeah. What kind of dog do you have?
Yeah, what kind of dog?
Oh, you haven't seen him, Joe? He's a Texas healer. Yeah.
I don't
Well,
think I've seen your
yeah,
dog.
yeah, he is. I guess he's a Texas healer. He looks like one, but my wife got him in a horse trailer, like forever, like underneath a horse trailer in some litter in the middle of nowhere. Gosh, guess he's almost 10 years old now. So yeah, something like that. He's getting pretty old. So
Cool. Never heard of a Texas healer.
yeah, well, I guess it's a mix of a red or he's a blue, so he's got blue. I guess it's a mix of a blue healer and a what else would that be? What's another? I can't remember.
He's
That's
your
my
dog.
wife's. That's my wife's department, man. that's like papers on horses or cattle or whatever. It's like, man, it's over my head. So
Yeah.
Yeah. There we
So
go. There's your
you
Texas
pulling one
healer
up, Ben?
real quick. Yeah, so we haven't done this before yet, and so this is a perfect opportunity. Can you guys see that? So
not
Mm-hmm.
yet.
yeah,
You
I
trying to
can't
speak
see it
here?
either. That's internet.
Yeah.
Internet sucks. That's all right.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll
Hold
come
on.
up.
You
with
want me to
something
do
else.
it? I'll do it.
Yeah, you give it a try. Maybe your internet's better. I bet
Yeah.
it is.
Uh-oh.
All
Oh,
right, I'm gonna.
here we go. Ben Cunningham's scream.
Is it working?
Yep,
It's
that's
trying
him.
to. Okay.
Oh, can you see it, Nathan?
Yep, I can see it. Yep.
You know what's weird
It's
is
a-
I can't even see it. Does he look like one of these?
Yeah, he does. He does. I mean, of course, these are all painted up in different ways, but yeah, he's painted up blue and black and white, and he's pretty. He's
Oh,
taken
it's
some hits over the years.
It sounds like it's the cross between an Australian cattle dog and an Australian shepherd.
Oh, well,
Okay.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't
You know what's
know where
weird?
Texas came into that deal,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, no idea.
Texans always kind of march to the beat of their own drum, so who knows?
There we go. Yeah, that's weird. You guys could see it, and I couldn't even see my own screen. Next time you give it a try, Joe, we'll see if your internet's better.
All right. Well, we'll have to keep talking. Next cool thing that comes up. Okay, so
I
you're
don't think people are listening because we're talking, man. I think they're probably doing yoga or meditation. They're probably
Yeah.
like, good deal. These guys shut up finally. No,
they're
just kidding.
No.
they're probably trying to fall asleep. I've had people tell me that they're
Chopping
like,
wood like me.
I love your podcast. Like I listen to it like as I fall asleep at night. I'm like, oh, glad it's that gripping.
Oh man.
Oh, we've already
So-
established you just have to watch the Buck Branham and Snafflebit DVD, and that's like listening to an audiobook meant for sleeping. It's
Yeah.
very calming.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so you're riding horses and then aircraft mechanic school, and then you I guess you're working as an aircraft mechanic there in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does riding for the public start? How does that get started?
Yeah. So, well, this is kind of where it gets, I guess, the most interesting for me, anyway. So, I don't know, for years, like I said, back in 2012, it was like, I don't know, there was something there, and I I neglected part of it as we were talking about, but at the same time, it's like you're trying to do better. Um, but there was, I don't know, I guess the best way to really put it, I had a divine appointment with horses that needed to take place in my life, and uh, and I'll never forget. So I think I told you about the lady who really mentored me, and she is one of the best people I've ever been around in my life. Her and her husband, they are. She was a big dressage lady at a university. She'd been in that world a lot, but she grew up in Alabama, and she really had kind of rode Western most of her life, but later on got pretty into the dressage, and she was good at it. And I'd ran into her at my in-laws arena. They were kind of doing like getting a program going, and I'd ran into her, and we'd kind of talk here and there, and I just always remember thinking like, man, I don't have time to do that. Like, I don't have time to spend that much time doing that with horses, And I remember one day I was down there just kind of putzing around, and she said, I was kind of admiring her horse. His name was Badger, and he was just, she had started him. Trying to get my timeline right. I'm horrible with dates like that. She had started him, I don't know, probably 2 years prior, and so she was advancing him pretty well. And I remember one day, and it might have been that day, she said, would you be interested in maybe riding him? And I thought, well, I don't know. And so anyway, I ended up doing it. When I got on that horse, it just like something just like absolutely clicked, like in my brain. Like, but at the same time, when that clicked, there was like this huge, overwhelming, I don't have time for this. Like I have an understanding of what this takes to get a horse to this level now that I'm sitting on this horse, and like I don't want to put that that much into it. I got other things going on, and this, that, and the other. So that was kind of you know I kind of ran from it for a little while, and then one day I got tired of running from it, and just kind of decided um, you know uh, I was going to go all in on it, and see what we could get done. And so I was still working as an aircraft mechanic, but I was being mentored by this lady. I'd say her name, but I don't know if she wants her name out there. So and she it would be just whenever I could, and she would come to or we'd go to her place, her arena, or another arena. There's a lot of arenas around here, Lexington. And she, for a couple of years, 2 years at least, she just, for nothing, I mean for free, she just absolutely um, gave me everything she had, and really transformed my ideas and my outlook on horses, and she really pushed me, and it was at that point, when I had decided towards the end of that, I was like, I want to do this. I think I want to do this for a living. I think I want to do this for a living, and at least try it. And so that was kind of my transition. I don't know if I jumped your question a little, but that was kind of what happened in my life that kind of led me to that. And I don't know about you guys, if you had an experience like that, do you remember your first good horse you got on? Like actual, like real good horse you got on? I mean, that was it for me.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm not sure I have yet.
Still
I can
waiting.
remember a lot of bad
I'll let
ones.
you know.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
No, but
Yeah.
there is something like when a horse just feels with you, it's a very different feeling than maybe if you
Yeah.
aren't as educated as what's going on and you're kind of playing like push
Mhm.
around, like push this button, push the horse over here, push the horse over here. And the first
Yeah.
time they're like
Mhm.
with you, and you kind of realize
Yeah.
there's something more there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
Hmm.
I do remember it wasn't the best horse I had ever been on, but I was working for the IX ranch there in Montana. And they have a good string of quarter horses. They've got some thoroughbred blood in there and nice big horses. But you know how, around this horsemanship we talk about how a horse can have that special part of them kind of snuffed out. And I'm not saying anything bad about the IX, but those old ranch horses, when they've been around for a while and everybody and their uncles have ridden them,
Sure.
that special part is, if it's not snuffed out, it's certainly flickering and it's on its
Sure.
way. And so I remember one day I got to ride a younger mare, and normally just one of the managers rode her, and it kind of scared the crap out of me. That was before I ever, heard about buck or kind of got any formal instruction that would do anything in terms of keep you safe or start to progress. But I remember riding her, and she was lively and forward, and I remember thinking like, hey, this is kind of scary. The guy would need to know how to take care of this, but this
Yeah.
feels good. This feels good to be
Yeah.
on this thing that's kind of alive and thinking, and it didn't
Hmm.
feel. I'd been on some snarky horses, and they were a little snuffed out feeling, except for they seemed to have it out for you. It just always
Yeah.
seemed like at the worst possible time they'd try to like jerk your chain,
Oh yeah.
and then you'd be on the real dead ones, and some were just so darn trained it was kind of like, man, this thing is just kind of a robot. But that mare,
Sure.
she had life, and I'm blessed now, to get to ride outside horses for folks. And when they bring you colts, a lot of times, you kind of get used to that after a while, the feeling of kind of a young horse that doesn't know much, and you're getting them
Sure.
going, and that's, to me, that's a real fun thing about what we do. But that mare, that was one of the first horses I'd been on that was raised well, bred well, had a ton of life, didn't know a bunch. I didn't know anything, but it was like a little taste of like, hey, you'd need to learn some skills, and you need to learn how
Sure.
to be a horseman, but you could ride a horse like this. And then I think that all led up to, then you watch Buck and you're like, holy
Hmm.
Toledo, that guy
Yep.
has the feet under control. He's like a master
Hmm.
musician. He's like Yanni, performing a symphony, or something, like where a guy just is in control of what he's operating. And that horse had the life of that mare I rode. It had
Yeah.
it was alive. And I think that was
Yeah.
exciting to me. It's like, okay, that's the top of the line.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and I can remember, on that ride, like specifically, I was pretty broad on it, for the sake of time, but I can remember specifically, she told me to stop that horse, and man, I remember just thinking stop, and that sucker sat down, and I was like, golly, I was like, I'd like to have one do something like that,
Yeah,
and
do you remember early on when just like stopping a horse was a big deal? And then you start
oh
getting
yeah,
some
man, you
steps
had to throw out
backwards
an anchor
and you're
and hope it
like,
hooked something. Yeah,
yeah. And then you get into that
yeah,
backing up stuff and you're like, oh man, you mean I can,
yeah.
just when they start leaning back, you're like, whoa,
Oh yeah,
what's that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's what's so cool about it is I can really, I mean, there's like parts of that. Don't fall asleep on us, Joe. There's
No,
parts of
I'm good,
that
man. Just
that I think
Coffee.
the individual progression of that. Like I remember too, like a real pivotal moment, like when I first felt like a really good like haunches in, like on a straight line. It was the same feeling. It was like whoa, like we can like this is cool, So I think I can just remember all that just all those little things, and I think that's what keeps you searching, keeps you going after it, and is that kind of stuff. Those moments of like I said, when I felt that badger horse sit down, I was like, man, that was wild. So, but yep,
good deal.
Well, I mean, you're obviously, well, so Nathan, like we're all talking about kind of the same thing. We obviously have different takes, but similar perspective on the same thing. So it does seem like it takes like that same thing hasn't grabbed the whole world. You're right. There's like 8 billion people,
sure,
and we know a
yeah,
lot of the guys who are kind of in this style of horsemanship, and then out from there you have the whole horse industry is huge, obviously, but
yeah,
it's not like the whole world is like super excited about riding horses. So
hmm
what like currently, and so it takes someone who gets grabbed by a thing and it's like,
hmm
I'm going to do this and I'm all in. So would you
yeah,
say currently right now you're all in with the cattle thing and with making that profitable, sustainable, giving back to your customers, providing for your family? And how do you kind of view that? Like, we're talking about
yeah.
the passion of the horsemanship, but what's kind of going on in your head right now with what you're currently doing?
Yeah, yeah. So it kind of grabbed me in the same way. I was in a unique transition period. You know, all of a sudden we had this farm, and we had to pay for it, and I've got another kid on the way, and just like this big pivotal moment. And I my biggest struggle with riding horses for a living for me was, I told Joe this a bunch, and to me, it's like I cherish it so much. It's like one of the highest arts, and so like trying to, for me, it was real difficult to 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 do both, and so it was a good time. I was kind of struggling with doing that for a living, but it was what was paying the bills, and so you know um, I had been actually I can remember when I really got kind of got that same feeling that I did with taking off with horses for the public. I can remember I was in a living quarters trailer starting a colt at another arena, and I can remember I was warming up some dinner in the microwave, and I was watching, on the uh, wormhole of YouTube, and I just kind of came across some stuff about ranches. Um, being sold out and farms being sold out, and I was like, I don't want that. If something happens to me when I'm riding colt or something, who's going to pay the bills, and or whatever, and so that's kind of what changed it for me. And I could get hurt today doing what I'm doing, doesn't really matter, but I was just kind of looking for something. If something happened to me, could my wife, could my kids, do this if they want to do this? And, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of what not just in that though. It wasn't just like a safety thing. It just really the whole idea of, of, of being able to sustainably and comfortably live and farm and ranch for a living, gosh, I don't know why it's not appealing to everybody, but that's appealing to me, and so and not have to be on the road so much, because that was starting to kind of take hold too, and so that was yeah, that's kind of how I got there, and but like I said, the horses, it was a divine appointment, man. I mean, it was it's what broke my um I guess broke my pride, broke whatever you want to call it. It broke it, and just changed the way I saw things, and working with the land, working with the cattle in their ecosystem to express, their the best genetic expression that they can express. Like, I want to promote that, no different than I want to promote that in a cult that I'm starting. I don't want to snub out what you're talking about. I don't want to take away what it is that makes them a horse, and the same, with cattle. And I haven't ever worked in a feedlot or anything, but I sure been around them, driving by them and stuff like that. And I probably make some people mad with this, and but I don't know, if I was a cow, I sure wouldn't want to be in a feedlot. That's just not my thing. But I definitely understand um, the industry the best I guess I can, and I see where we're at now. But I do know now, just like I figured out with horses, that there is a better way, and I can't deny that, and I can't. So again, once the truth was once I was enlightened, it was like, well, you know, you can't really, I can't stop now, now that I know. So, but yeah,
Yeah. It's almost like you had two different experiences where you kind of got pulled out of the matrix a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
Well, and Nathan too, you just said, you're like, I don't know why more people don't want to live this way, but I think a lot of people, they don't know. They haven't been pulled out of the matrix. And, I think I'm a bit like you and Joe, the same as, we have a lot of interests and we like to do things. And then not only us, but you think of the majority of people in the world, you start to chase all kind of things and you think it looks really fun. And you start going towards all this stuff. But I think about today, even, we were talking about our day earlier, but like the best part of my day is when I did make it out there with those guys and we tagged a calf and beautiful sunset and sitting there. And my fiance had even come ridden out with us. And I kind of took it for granted because you were talking just now and I just realized that was the most peaceful part of my day. I didn't think about bills. I didn't think about calling anybody. I didn't think about doing this podcast. I didn't think about anything. But in fact, I was actually happy because I have this goofy horse. He's got kind of crooked legs and I was riding him and I was even petting him, thinking he was turning around a little bit and stuff. And I was petting him, thinking he was awesome. And it's so simple, but we don't realize how good that is for us. We think we want all this stuff we see everybody else doing, but that was the most peaceful part of my day. So fulfilling. I didn't have a worry in the world. And, maybe we don't want everybody to inundate our farms and ranches just yet, but isn't that part of the Will Harris idea? Or you hear, what's the guy? He's up there in Virginia. Gosh, I've been past his farm, Polyface Farms guy.
No, Joe Salatin, yeah.
But that's what they talk about, is having these farms so that everybody can have food and every local community can have a farm, but it kind of goes beyond the food. It's maybe that's part of pulling people out of the matrix, is coming out to the farm to get their food. But then while they're there, they start to realize hey, when I go by, Nathan's farm stand every Friday afternoon, that's the most peaceful part of my week. And maybe they can never be a farmer, but maybe you're supplying this little bit of peace. And I mean, all you're doing really is giving people a little taste of what is natural and real, but it's like medicine. And I mean, you wonder why people don't live like that more, but it does make sense. And like Joe said, there's kind of a matrix, and there's a lot of people and a lot of, you can't fix everything in one day, but that's something to kind of to look at and be thankful for and not take for granted that whether it's horses or your cattle or it's very simple. It's very wholesome and it's super rewarding. And then in your case, that's really cool because maybe you can share that with people more than a guy just riding colts. Everybody does it their own way, but when you're riding horses, it's kind of for you, but when you're growing food for other people, it's not much different, but you're doing it on a much larger scale and you're giving back.
Yeah. And that's part of it, is selling the beef and really I really have a heart for like I said, the farmers and ranchers. I've got several who've really kind of caught wind of what we're doing, and some of the guys like I got to be careful because I know there's a big horse community here, so these podcasts get around. So, but we got a lot of conventional guys right here around us, and sometimes, well, when I first started doing this stuff, and they saw my my poly wire coming out, and stepped into post, and us moving 100+ head of cattle and not having to hoop and holler and drive them through or anything like that, he thought I was some dink. And now we've been in a drought all year, and I'm still growing grass and he's not. And so and I'm not saying that in a braggy way, but I'm just saying it in a management way of it's kind of like sometimes we're pretty quick, just like I was with the horse stuff, to be like, yeah, I don't have time for that. Like I just get on horses and ride, and but there's always more to it, and I think that's what I always try to keep in mind. So my heart is for the people like my neighbors who, if they, if they would change, I guess, the way they manage a little bit, it could lower their stress levels and improve their quality of life at the same time, make them more profitable and support their family a little bit better. And for me, that's really where I have I guess where my heart is in this is I don't know if I'll ever, be the one to tell my neighbor that, but maybe just leading by example, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's what I wanted to ask you about too, is like what different forms that comes in, because it sounds like that's not much different than if you're following, good horsemanship and you go roll up to some dressage barn where they're using gimmicks and all kind of goofy stuff. And, anyone listening, if that's you, sorry, but if you're a great dressage person, there's plenty of them out there. There's great dressage riders. We all know them, but
Sure.
That's just an example. Go to a goofy barn though, right? And it's really difficult to be the guy standing there and have someone say, "Oh yeah, you do, horsemanship. That's really cool." They're not going to say that, but they might say something good about what they do, and they expect you to kind of nod along because you're like the new guy on the block. You're the minority.
Yeah.
And so it's always that weird situation where you just keep your mouth shut a lot, and they get to say whatever they want, and we're always having to be nice, And so in your business, and obviously you're a nice guy, and you just alluded to that. You're like, you don't want to make enemies with your neighbors at all. They've been doing that for generations, but you're just trying something new. You're trying something different.
Yeah.
Have you experienced any kind of pushback or anybody kind of saying like, "Hey man, that's not cool," or what's that been like?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, I've experienced pushback, from my own family for that matter, but the proof's in the pudding, man. I think there's this balance. I was thinking about this today. You're in this balance of when you're kind of a black sheep like me, where when you're experimenting with things, where like you're trying to be, you're trying to have enough courage to like do your own thing, and you're trying to stay to stay centered in having that courage and balancing, you know, um, the pushback from other people, and at the same time trying to, you know, learn what it is you're actually after. And I know that kind of might sound funny, but it's like what we were talking about with the buck thing. It's like you hear it and you're trying it, but you don't really know until you're kind of on that, you know, on that road. And so yeah, I've experienced a lot of pushback, and well, you know, just an update on my neighbor's story. You know, we talk at the fence every once in a while when we run into each other, and he goes, he's like, "Man, your pastures are looking good." And he said, "I think I might have to get out some poly wire this spring, you know, coming spring." And I said, "Yeah, it'd be pretty good," you know.
Yeah.
So you know, he's been seeing it for, you know, 2 years now, and I haven't said a word to him, you know, and he just, you know, he's made a lot of snide comps and stuff over the last couple of years and stuff like that. But you know, I just kind of, it's like anything, you know, like I said with the horses, it's anytime you're different, people tend to, I don't know, they want to pick at you until you become relevant. Then they want to be your friend, you know, and it's just life, man. So,
Yeah.
Well, from what you're saying, man, we'll tell you the details off air, but we've got some great ideas for a T-shirt, and I think it's going to be a hot
okay.
seller because it's on point. But it has to do with that. Like, yeah, you get stuck in following tradition so hardcore that
Yeah.
that's a weird mentality, but you get stuck to the point where you're following tradition and you're not following common sense and you're not
Hmm.
following you like a logical path of thinking and of trying to
Yeah.
achieve a good outcome. You're just doing it because you know your dad did it and you do it, um
Hmm.
and hey, that's great, but it's really cool when a guy comes along and does something new and just
Yeah.
plugs away.
Yeah.
Just I guess so. That's the answer, right? Is just keep doing what you're doing, do the best job you can, and then the proof is in the
Yep.
pudding. I think that's tough, man. That's tough for me is to remember, um, just you know, like winners never quit and quitters never win, like that. Just keep going because it's real easy for
Yeah.
me to like look back and go, oh man, I'm climbing this mountain and I'm pretty sure the ground behind me is higher than where I'm at right now, and
Yeah.
man, that's easy for me to do. And it's
Yeah.
like getting out of bed in the morning. You know, it's like that thing where, like the night before, you're like, I'm gonna get up at 5, and the next morning you're like, I'm gonna sleep until 9. And you almost feel fine doing it. It's hard to tell yourself like get up, and you know you
Yeah.
have to do it, and you go through that cycle every day, or for some of
Yeah.
us anyway, where when you're in the moment, when you know the right thing to do, it's extremely hard to do, and it seems like it's fine to just take the easy path. And then you stand back and look at it and you go, no,
Yeah.
I got to do the hard thing. And then you're there in that moment again. And you're like, no, 9 o'clock sounds better. I'm going to keep sleeping.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I think that's
it's
plugged
tough.
human history. Yeah. I think that's just, yeah, human nature, you know, and it's, you know, I found, I found a lot of comfort, um, you know, the Apostle Paul, you know, he talks about, you know, I don't want to do all these things that I'm doing, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you know, I keep doing them anyway, and you know, I know what I shouldn't do, but I keep doing it, and you know, that's so true, and yeah, it's funny. I was just talking to my sister today on the phone, and you know, you guys are talking about the Matrix, and I think a lot of it, you know, might be the victim mentality, and all of us here, everybody on this earth has played victim at some point to something, and you know, I think if there's something I don't want to be, and it's a victim, um, and whether I created it or not, you know, and so if you go out on your own and you're doing your thing, um, even if you're just a bad parody of somebody else, and you know, everything I'm doing, I didn't come up with it, you know, no different than the horsemanship stuff. Um, but you know, you've got to figure it out for yourself, so you're experimenting, you know, with what you're doing, you know, your leg position, or your paddock size, or your cattle size, or whatever, saddles, whatever. You've got to experiment with these things and see what fits you, and what fits the horse, and what fits your ranch, your farm, and you got to, that is like what we said, that's the proof. That's the proof in the pudding right there, man. So you've got to you got to have the courage to do that. And a lot of people, they're real worried about what people think about them, for doing that stuff, and they just, you know, they're so trapped by the victim mentality. Like if I go off and do this on my own, what do people think? And we all deal with that. I definitely do. I'm sure you guys do on some level, and um, you got to throw that away, because it ain't going to get you anywhere. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, with you, man, I don't see how. Obviously now it's like one of those things. Everyone's an overnight success. It just takes like 10 years before it's overnight. Like with you now, you're
10 years. Yeah, that's true.
you're you're running your farm, and you're able to like support your family, and it's not like you're doing it like with you having a job in town and your wife having a job in town. Like what me growing up, like I there was a very commonplace thing. Like my grandfather was an extension agent, and it was just kind of like understood in my area with like the lines of thinking. It was like, oh yeah, well it's good to be a farmer, but if you're going to be a farmer, that means your spouse has to work in town. Or if you're going to be a farmer, it
Sure.
means you got to work in town and be the farmer, and all that stuff. And I'm not saying everyone's financial situation might not require that. It's obviously depends. Like you said, you got to fit your ranch or your
Hmm.
whatever. But like, man, from what I can see, from what you set up and the fact that it seems like you and your wife have a pretty good quality of life, um, from what kind of the legwork you've done and what you set up, and your trajectory looks even better than where you're at now. Like it just is, it would be hard for me to imagine people could look at all that and still kind of doubt you as far as what you've accomplished with this system and um, the low input management and things like that. So for me, it's been really impressive, but like you said, it's no different than if you get into horsemanship at the beginning. Like I know when I got into it, there were people who maybe were kind of like, I don't like, why are you getting into that stuff? What are you doing? And they kind of saw me, who was just learning, no feel, like just no horrible timing, all that stuff. And so like they would watch me fail, and they'd be like, see, now I told you that stuff doesn't work. And it's like, well, no,
Hmm.
that's me like being new at something and taking my licks and trying to get better. Um, and then if you have that stick to itness, like you said, you keep doing the things that you need to be doing, and try to avoid the things you ought not be doing, um,
Hmm.
and kind of trust the process. Then all of a sudden you get that overnight success. But you kind of have to have faith, and like you said, you have to have those moments where you're like, oh, okay, this is like worth pursuing. And to me,
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like you've gone through that, and it's obviously you're probably not where
I'm
you want to
still
be,
there,
but
man.
it's very, yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, well, and I'll be the first to tell you, we've had help along the way, and there's no such thing as I adopted this very really. I used to think before the horses that I was going to be a self-made man, like that was an achievable feat. And I've come to learn that it's not. You've got too many people in too many places. Like I said, nothing that we're doing, nothing that you guys are doing with horsemanship, in the foundation of it, you could be experimenting on your own. That's stuff that other people figured out, right? The same for me, and the same. There's we live in a time where um, like what we were talking about, Ben. You know, technology has really, we don't have a lot of excuses anymore to not have access to information, to not educate ourselves, and you know, I guess that's the most frustrating thing for me. You know, with this, or that, I'm sure with horsemanship, you guys understand it too. Having people coming in is you know, if people would take advantage of some of that stuff, you know, just like I have, just like you guys are, um, you know, the, the world would just be, you know, would just be a better place, you know, because in anything that somebody is interested in, somebody has more than likely put some information out there that could get them further than most other people in a very short amount of time if they took it pretty serious and implemented it, you know, in the best way that they could possibly do. And you know, unless you're like Elon Musk or something, you know, that guy, he's I think he's kind of leading the deal in that. But you know, I think that for the time we live in, there's just really no excuse to not be educated in whatever it is that you're pursuing. You know, uh, I don't care. You know, I really don't care what it is. And if somebody could tell me something that there's not a lot of information out there on, um, you know, I'd love to see it because that would interest me. But um, you know, whether it be horses, you know, even before like the Buck Channel or any of those things, you know, all the DVDs. I know I wore them out. I had to buy extra sets because I literally wore them out. You know, I mean, it's there's just no excuse to not get educated on this stuff. And but what you're saying, as far as like going through, you know, the process of it, you know, we're still in the early stages. You know, talk to me in 10 years. You know, make sure we're still floating in 10 years, and we'll see what happens. But you know, it's really, I don't know. It's really, it's interesting the amount of people that are hungry for this, just like the amount of people that are hungry for horsemanship. Once they kind of see it, like what you're talking about, once they kind of see the systems being implemented and some of the results of those systems, um, it's attractive. I mean, how could it not be? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all have a little college, little university in our pocket, and
Yeah.
it is a pretty, yeah. We were talking about that too, Nathan. That we're those guys who when you're you know, in your teens and you're thinking about how awesome it would have been to be born in the 1800s, or be, you know,
Hmm.
you're like, I'm in the wrong decade. I need to be drinking coffee,
Hmm.
sitting by a fire, and where now it's like, in a way, all that campy, old fashioned stuff, it is beautiful. We appreciate it, but it's more like art, and we get to do it much safer and much more enjoyably, because we're
Yeah.
afforded that in this modern world. And um, yeah, I mean, whether it's a good time on earth or not, whatever, it's our life. We're here. We're here right now, and I
Hmm.
love your
Yeah.
attitude, and I hope to see more people take that attitude on. You know, I know I've mentioned it before, with Joe, but like I'm here in Georgia at Bill Barnes's place, and we have this internship we do, and mostly young men come, and a lot of times I see, and I'm not trying to sound old here, but remember, it's the mileage, not the years, and so these guys show up, and I think, gosh, that's me. You know, when I left Montana and when I
Mm.
met Buck and saw all that stuff, and so you see that thing in their eyes, and you see where they're yearning for that simple cowboy life, and in some ways like wanting to kind of diss society or diss cities a little bit,
Hmm.
and I remember that same feeling, but then in a way that's just kind of a defensive mechanism where you're looking for something to fill yourself with, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's something I wanted to ask you about is, you know, we talk about, well, like the horse thing, for instance. That's like that's a real big deal to people that do it, and we take it very
Hmm.
seriously. But it took me quite a while. I haven't got it perfected, but at least I am aware of it now. that that you are not what you do, and that, you know, I'm Ben, and something that I do is ride horses for people. Something else
Mm-hmm.
I do is the podcast here with Joe. Something else I do is brush my teeth every morning. You know, there's a bunch of
Yeah.
things I do, but it's not my identity. And it's
Yeah.
taken me quite a while to just be aware of that. And so I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, like, when you transitioned and went headlong into the cattle thing, um, well, let me back that up a little bit. Like, I remember, and I have some good friends, and we've laughed about it since a little bit, and maybe they still think this, but they'll say things like, I'd live in a cardboard box before I quit riding horses. You know, I'll live under a bridge, and
Yeah.
I'm going to make a bridle horse and ride horses if it kills me. And maybe they mean
Yeah.
that. And that's their life. And hey, if someone did do that, that'd be kind of admirable, right? If we knew this guy that lived in a cardboard
Sure.
box and couldn't make a
Need another
living, but he made a
documentary.
bridle horse, we'd be like, hell yeah, that would be an awesome
Yeah.
documentary. But most people aren't going to do that. And if you have a wife and kids, now I don't think I'd make a
Yeah.
documentary about you. We would talk pretty bad about you. And,
Yeah.
but for you to make the transition for whatever reason you did you struggle with a
Mm-hmm.
feeling of like maybe you thought your identity was going to go with the horses and now you had to come up with a new identity, or did you have any thoughts
Oh
like
yeah.
that?
Oh,
And
every
how'd you
day.
deal with that?
Yeah. I mean, that was honestly probably the hardest part, because, you know, that was kind of, you you can get in the matrix of that too, you know, of anything that you do. You can get locked into like everything revolving around that, and I think that kind of goes back to that kind of married to tradition. Like there's this ideal of what this stoic um, cowboy who starts colts and makes bridle horses is, and I I you can't help being guys like us, find that to be one of the most, you know, beautiful things, you know, there is. But it's you you know, you kind of got to tap back to reality, and like what I said, you know, before this started, um it's cool being, you know, different until you're irrelevant, you know. And so for me, I kind of realized that the same thing you just talking on, you know, the biggest struggle was like, man, you know, I don't think I can let go of this. You know, I don't think I can do anything but this. I don't know how to be anything but this. And not that that was my whole life, but it's like when you put so much into it, um, you almost forget what life was before that, you know. And so for me in that transition, you know, I really, you know, I spent a lot of time, you know, thinking about, you know, why it is I'm tied to some of these, you know, earthly things, and things that are temporary, you know. And so there's a lot of freedom in that for me, is, you know, when I realized, and it was hard because there's a lot of people who are really upset with me and disappointed for stepping out of it, you know. And you know, you don't want to let anybody down, but you know, it you know, we had to do what we had to do. And you know, I'm I questioned it so many times, even though I had this strong pull, you know, to do what it is that we're doing now. But it didn't make it easier mentally, you know. So, like I said, I just spent a lot of time. You know, I man, I prayed a lot about it, and I just spent a lot of time thinking on, you know, who, like, I don't know, reinventing myself, like the authentic me, that can exist without horses, or even without cattle, without, you know, I didn't want to step into this new thing and it have any control over me, if that makes sense. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do feel like, you know, that was a huge growing point for sure, as a person. And you know, it's there's a lot of freedom in that, man. I don't know if that answers your question, but there's a lot of freedom when your identity is not wrapped up in things like that. So, and again, it's still something, something that's not easy, but I don't have to swallow hard anymore over the deal. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense, man. And well, listening to you talk, you kind of connected a lot of things that we've been talking about this evening in my mind. Because a little while ago you mentioned that once you come to the knowledge of the truth and you're aware of the best way to do something, you feel kind of stupid not doing it. And
Yeah.
and you mentioned Rogan too, and if anyone has listened to him much, they've probably heard that quote. It's really good by what was it? Mishimoto Musashi, something like that. And
Yeah.
but he said once you understand the way broadly you see it in everything. And
Yeah.
that to me, that's another one of those quotes where you're like, you can take that and put that in your horsemanship folder because it applies,
Yep.
because it's part of everything, right? And so
Hmm.
once let's say you do start pursuing horsemanship and you're gung ho, you're all in. Well, if you start to get good at it and you start to understand that the underlying principle is not just what you see on the surface, now you're starting to understand not just horses, but you're starting to understand life. And then
Yeah.
now you're at that point where you are seeing things in a more truthful light. And let's say you're having some financial trouble and you go, oh, so these things I'm learning about horsemanship, well, that applies to my relationships. And then, oh, that applies to my checkbook and the way I've been running that and what I've been
Yep.
prioritizing. So now, that way the broadness is starting to spread throughout your life. And then maybe you do have to sit down with yourself and analyze something and go, you know what? The smartest thing and the thing that I actually want to do that I'm shunning or don't realize or whatever that is, you're like, that's it. And I need to do it. And then now you're at the piece you just talked about where you're following truth and you're listening to what's right. And so, yeah, even if it's a little uncomfortable or maybe your friends aren't too into it or there's some pushback, you're doing what's right. And whenever you do what's right, how can
Yeah.
that be wrong? And the other thing too is like, man, so have you ever known a really good horseman who wasn't good at doing quite a few things, right? I mean, I know a few. I know some that are surgeons, some
Oh
are
yeah.
great salesmen, real estate agents, leather workers, golfers, just snazzy people. Schnazzy, I got these stupid Invisalign things. Schnazzy, that's a hard word. Schnazzy people in general. And so whenever a guy says that, God, I don't know what I would do. All I know how to do is ride horses. I just kind of stuck. It's all I can do. It's either he's bullshitting you and he can do a lot of other things, or maybe he really isn't good at being a horseman either. And someday when he gets a little better, heck, he might have some other ideas too. So I think that's a really good topic, man. It's something that isn't really talked about a lot. And then when people do talk about it, maybe they're the guy that's had some success from scamming a bunch of people with their good idea. And then by then their advice is like BS because everyone's like, yeah, no, we don't like you. And,
Yeah.
but that's the classic case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And,
Yeah.
it's a very valid thing. Truth is pretty valid.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
hearing your story and knowing a little bit about you and, this is probably the second time we've talked, but Joe and he'll mention you from time to time because he's closer to where you're at. And I think interacts
Sure.
with you a little more. But kind of watching that from afar, and it's like, yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool to see a guy doing what he wants, or sometimes it's doing what you need to. And in other parts of my life, it's helped me when I hear someone I'm around go, hey, did you see what so and so is doing now? To instead of just jump on the bandwagon and be like, yeah, what is he doing? To go, oh yeah, what is he doing? Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why. Because we don't
Sure.
know, and it's kind of naive to think that one of the smallest categories of work on the face of the earth should go around telling other people, what they should be doing. So I love that attitude
Sure.
and perspective, and that's a great message for any person doing anything. But gosh, especially people that get into horses and love it. and they do love it, and it's totally valid.
Yeah.
But hey,
Yeah.
if they end up finding something else they love or want to put their effort into, more power to them. Because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we all need what everybody does, and we want everybody to do it to the best of their ability. So I
Yeah.
think that's a great attitude.
Yeah, and I think something that we could maybe all agree on, and I'll ask you, but I think the most appealing thing of probably the most appealing thing originally of seeing Buck doing what he's doing was, at that point in our life, he was a black sheep. He was authentically doing what he believed he needed to do, and that's what he's doing now, right? So I think that I think that's when you come across somebody like that in any discipline, in anything, like when they're just kind of dedicated to what they believe in, that is probably the most appealing thing. And I think people get lost in tying their identity to individuals that they admire, and that keeps them from being able to figure out who they are authentically. And and to do that, because we hold our mentors in very high esteem, and I've got mentors in this, but I can't do exactly what it is that they're doing, because that's them and that's what they're doing. Like that's what makes it so authentic. And so I need to, if I want to be in the same realm, that's fine, but I need to be so busy hunting it for myself that I kind of get lost with maybe what even my mentor's doing. It doesn't mean that I check back in and learn some stuff, because obviously they're your mentor for a reason. But, I always push Joe on that real hard. I'm always like, oh man, you ought to do this. Who cares what anybody thinks? Just, if you feel like you should do it, man. And I think that's what really brings out the Buck Branamans and the Beethovens and the Elon Musks, and like all these guys that's what, to me, that's what it is. When people are just so busy doing their own thing, they just do not care what anybody else is doing. They're just hunting that thing, man, hard. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, like you said, where you can't. Earlier I said Buck at the beginning, he was like a target for us, right?
yeah,
But
absolutely.
there comes to a point where you can't just aim at a target for somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe in this one thing, like I want to ride like Buck Brannaman, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't say like I'm just gonna be that, because you're almost doing yourself a disservice, because you'll never be the best version of you. That you're always gonna kind of
Yeah,
be
absolutely.
trying to like put like a square peg in a round hole.
Whoa,
Right?
Joe,
Yeah.
you're always going to be a terrible version of that person.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is like you're
Yeah.
trying to like put, if you're like I want to be that person, and you're just trying to take like you and like cram it into the mold of that person, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
like you could be it like a very excellent you, and you could be the best version of you. And all those people you're talking about, Nathan, they go on and become the best version of themselves, and it just turns out that the best version of themselves is incredibly exceptional. But like if
Yeah.
Beethoven, tried to be like exactly like so and so from down the street, you're not going to be that. Even
Yeah.
if Beethoven really respected that guy, like you have to be you, and that's the only way you're going to reach your full potential, reach your calling, reach God's plan, like however you want
Mm-hmm.
to look at that. That's the only way to
For
do it.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I was kind of laughing. This is on a side note, but you guys I've been able to catch up on some of the last podcasts you guys have done. Told Joe I've been splitting wood, man. Winter's coming. So anyway, I've been catching up. You guys are talking about the Lord of the Rings and stuff, and you know, it's funny. I just finished the Hobbit again. You know, the book. You know, not the movie, and it's so funny you know, the appealing part of that is you know, you've got this black sheep, you know, where you have all these characters that would be your typical heroic characters. um it's the one who you would least expect, you know, the one who's doing things totally different than everybody else, has different mannerisms, sees things different, you know, like he's the, you know, he's the dude, you know. I mean, you know, I don't know how else to put it. And I think that we all got to be striving for that, you know. We got to be, we really need to try to be seeking who we are, and not getting wrapped up in who everybody, you know, who everybody else is. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess also to go along with that, you don't want to go out there and purposely just be different than everybody else. But like the process of finding,
Yeah.
the process of analyzing things with the tools that you get from the people that have gone before you allow you to wield those tools or weapons or whatever kind of life you have, in a way where you're being guided. You're measuring all these things that are coming at you. You're gauging them with these tools, and you're kind of, you're trying to be honest. You've got your got your glasses on, like that movie, right? They're here. You're wearing your glasses, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm kind of chasing a false idol there, and then you divert, and you're not purposely just out there like, well, I'm going to be different. I'm going to stand out, you know. But you will stand out by just being honest with yourself and being honest with your situation.
Yeah. It's almost like you got to pull yourself towards, there's probably a better way to articulate it, but pull yourself like towards your truth, like what you believe you need to be doing, what you need to like be spending your time on, who you need to try to become. And yeah, it's not very easy because, you know, they call it a black sheep for a reason. It's a way easier to be a part of the flock. It doesn't take near as much effort to be as part of the flock.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, on that like finding, you know, even when you think you found maybe your truth, I think something that I've really been hunting hard is like testing that, because you know, again, you can get married up to what you've like, you know, what you think is like, you know, you've been enlightened, and all of a sudden, like, you know, you're not trying anymore, you know. And so a big thing for me, you know, is like, I heard this the other day, and you guys might have heard it somewhere too, floating around, but you know, your brain is like always trying to, um, um, I guess, confirm what it is you believe or know. Like, it's always trying to. Like, if you accept something, it's always looking for a reason to like confirm that. And I think, you know, to be able to grow, you kind of got to try to be unbiased, and you know, test what it is you believe in, so that, you know, when the hard times come, like what we were talking about, or people are poking and prodding at you, you know, you can really stand firm in whatever it is you're doing. Or, you know, when you roll into that dressage barn to ride that warm blood colt, and you got your chaps and hat, and everybody's like, he smells funny, you know, you can, you know, kind of be, you know, you're not worried about that, because you know what you're doing, you know your place, and you know what it is you're there to do. And I think always testing what you believe in, and it is very important. So
Yep. Yeah, that's you got to kind of stay on the move that way.
yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, because it's like if you're constantly doing that, you kind of, it's almost like you put yourself in a crucible of your own ideals. And if you're always just like reproving to yourself what you believe in, or reevaluating what you believe in, what you're doing, or even in your craft, like I'm doing this with the horses, or I'm doing this with the cattle, and this is working out. And you you can't you can't take any of it for granted, because then, like you said, when you are in a position to have that tested to see who you are, like you've been forged in that crucible, and you're like, no, I'm firm in my belief, because I've put in the legwork to prove this to myself. And so since I've, like most people, you guys are probably the same way. I'm my toughest critic. So like, if I can prove it to myself, then I can darn sure prove it to other people, if they're even kind of half listening or half paying attention. So,
for sure.
But again, it takes effort. It all kind of boils down to like effort and kind of the awareness to do that, because it's a lot easier to go along and be a part of the flock.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's, discipline, and that's obviously something that the world's lacking nowadays. And it's something that I really, growing up the way I did, discipline was always a big deal, in that, like, just having a dad with a military background. His dad had a military background. It's kind of, comes with the territory. And I think that sometimes, like I'm sure you guys have felt this way. Maybe you haven't been to town in a while, and you've been riding horses, and you kind of get in your own little world, and maybe start believing your press, your own press, and and then, like, you step back out into the world. I say the world, you go to the feed store, you could go to, I don't care. You just step back out into the world, and you realize how, how different, people think. And I guess what I'm getting at is like, for us to really, do whatever it is and do it well, in some capacity, you got to be serving other people with it. And in order to do that, you've got to get out of that, you got to get out of that that island, get off that island, and so, me growing up real disciplined, it was difficult, for me to not understand why other people weren't as disciplined as I'm sure you have things too, right? Like Joe, you're a pretty outgoing guy, and I'm sure you've been around other people who aren't, and it's like, well, how could that person, not talk to me, or so, you know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah,
It's like,
absolutely.
and I think it's this, it's this deal on, it doesn't matter what you're doing, and everything. And I think for us, being young guys, passionate about what we're doing, we got to keep that, in mind, is that, no matter what we do, we need to be focused on what it is we're doing, but we need to realize that we've got to serve people in some capacity. And that's where, that's going to solidify you as well in what you're doing, is when you're able to help people with whatever it is you're doing, and in whatever thing, whatever way you're doing it. So if you can't help people with it, it's probably not really worth doing,
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the most successful men who have ever lived, whether it be great spiritual leaders or business tycoons, they were men of service to other people. They weren't on an island. They were out there, giving to others, and they gave so much that they were given to, whether it was spiritual or monetarily, or whatever it was, they received, because their business was giving service and giving the utmost quality of service they could provide to other people.
Yeah, because you can really, hound dog it and be focused on yourself, and and you can always do too much of one thing. And, as much as we've talked about focusing and staying in your lane and not worrying about what the other guy's doing, you also I don't think you want to come out of it and, and kind of hit somebody with a fire hose of all these new ideas and all these things that's not really serving anybody. That's just you filling your ego. So, I think, it's really, it's a hard balance. And I think, I don't really know if there's an answer for it, but I think if you're aware of that and like, that's out there and that's something you should be doing and you're trying to stay balanced, it'll come about in the right way. And when it comes about, you'll be able to, do what you need to do when the time's right. But yeah, I don't know. It's a funny world, man. It's funny doing the things that we're doing. There's not a lot of young guys that are passionate about much of anything. So I think we're in an anomaly in ourselves sitting here talking on a podcast, and I surely admire you guys for what you're doing and support you guys with this deal. Cause, I love the name. I remember when Joe was telling me like a year ago. I think we were on our first vacation in forever. We're in the Ozarks, and Joe was like, "What do you think about this name or this name?" And I was like, "Oh, dude, all day long, on the move," because that's something that I've thought about. Like, especially when I was riding horses. Like, I want to be so busy being busy, like doing what I'm doing, trying to get better and learn that everybody's just like, man, that dude's on the move, So it's pretty.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. What you guys are doing is pretty awesome.
Well, thanks, man. The admiration is reciprocated because we talked about a lot of cool stuff tonight, but one of the things, like I said, we've talked about your transition and how you've kind of had the wisdom to not have your identity be riding horses. And gosh, I mean, that's like a classic young man thing, is to really struggle with your identity and just, how easy it is to hitch your wagon to something. And you're like, well, this is what I do. It's like guys in the military do it, guys who play sports do it. Like, you just hitch your wagon to this one thing and you're like, this is what I do, this is who I am. And for you to make the transition that you did, I'm not saying it was easy at all, but to come out the other side, like, it shows an exceptional strength of character. That's my personal opinion. Because a lot of people probably couldn't have done it, at least from the lens I viewed it from, done it as gracefully as you did. And I think a lot of it comes from your humility and your attitude with a lot of the things that you've discussed tonight. Like, you got to serve other people. You got to, remember, again, it all comes back to humility and kind of the strength of character that I've seen from you. So yeah, man, I appreciate you saying that about us, but holy cow, man, I think you're like a good example for just like young guys in general, because it's like, oh, this is someone who anything he pursues it 100%. He's confident enough in himself, in his faith and in who he is as a person. Like, he doesn't let these transitions like kind of rock him, tear him apart or anything like that. And lastly, from what I can tell, you seem like a pretty good husband and a pretty good dad. So yeah, there's a lot to admire about you, man. And I'm glad we were finally able to get you on. I know I had to really twist your arm. Ben, you didn't hear the conversation. I like bullied Nathan. I was about ready. I was like, I will sacrifice this friendship to get him on the podcast.
I told my wife. I said he had me dead to rights. I was like, he had me, and he pretty much got out the hot shot and loaded me in the trailer with it. He was like, He's like, this is it. And so no, in all truthfulness, I wanted to do this, not because I think I have anything, and I surely appreciate what you had to say there, and yeah, I just really appreciate what you had to say there. It's definitely, you say it was graceful, but it felt like, falling down the Rockies, but and collecting yourself at the bottom and climbing back to the top. But and not that I've climbed back to the top, but you know what I mean. Just that whole picture. But it's I'm just I don't know. I'm just glad to be able to have other guys like you around. To be fair, I mean, we really are on an island. I was just talking with another young guy who's kind of farming and ranching the way we are, and he said to me the other night, we were talking on the phone. He said, "Man, I don't want to be weird, but he's like, it's so nice to be able to talk to somebody who's trying to do something, trying to add, trying to add to this world and to other people, and instead of just trying to take, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's what it's about, man." So.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad Joe did twist your arm, and amen to everything you said. And thanks for doing this, because it's been a really enjoyable evening talking with you. And more power to you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Things keep going really well. And maybe if I ever get up there, I'll stop in. I'll come see you. But it sounds really cool. Kentucky is always a lot farther away than I think it is, though. It always seems I'm still not used to living on the East Coast or down. I should say the Southeast. And so Kentucky feels like it's right there. And then you go to drive to Kentucky and it's like 10 hours later you roll in. So,
yeah, I know it is odd. I just was down in Alabama, and it was so much closer than what I thought it was. But then, like, I went out by Joe's in the spring. Where did I go? Like Farmville area, Appomattox, and man, it took forever to get out there. And I feel like that's like right next to us, And so I feel you, man. So we lived out west. It was like, it's pretty common to have to drive a couple hours to get somewhere and still be in the same state. And I don't know. I just feel like being this side of the Mississippi shouldn't take that long to get somewhere. But
yeah, I don't know, man. Personal flying cars. We need somebody else to drop out of horsemanship and start developing flying cars that are safe, and then we'll be all good.
Yeah.
And ones that can tow horse trailers. So,
there you
guy
go.
listening or gal, that's you. You need to get on that. Get on the move and make those right now. All right, we better wrap this thing up.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the podcast you just listened to, take a moment and head on over to Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. There you can leave us a review, or better yet, give us 5 stars. You can also find On the Move on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Folks, we really appreciate the support. It allows us to do what we do here and keep growing week by week. Until next time, stay on the move.